Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Teresa from IPIM, and welcome to today's session, Creating a Sustainable Mind Sector. During the session today, we have simultaneous interpretation available from English to Chinese. To listen to the session in English, please choose the English channel from the interpretation icon on your menu bar. The session this afternoon will be moderated by Mr. Mike Williams, who is Senior Partner at Gds, and we are excited to have Mr. Guy Bigwood joining us as our keynote speaker, Managing Director of Ruby Consulting and the Global Sustainability Index. To commence, I would like to introduce Mr. Benson Lau, President of IPRIM, to say a few words of welcome.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second online seminar in 2021, which is held by the Macau Trade and Investment Promotion Institute and facilitated by the Gds. The topic of today is creating a sustainable MICE destination. I hope all of you can gain the most fruitful insights from the sharing of our speaker today on this brand new topic. Being an important industry in anchoring global economies and global trend sector in business, it is essential to catch the opportunity to revolutionize and take the lead as a solution and platform provider for different industries. With this developing trend, MICE industry has seen an upsurge in interest surrounding sustainable development. How to design a MICE event productively, to brand a MICE destination sustainably, and to connect the MICE industry tightly become essential topics to explore. Therefore, in today's seminar, we will look into details of Global Destination Sustainability Index with the visualization of data and practical cases. We will deep dive into what makes a sustainable MICE destination and how each member of the industry can play a role in its development. In respect of destination sustainability, it is the honor to have the Managing Director of Gds Consulting and Global Sustainability Index from Barcelona, Mr. Gds Bigwood, here with us today. Mr. Bigwood is a recognized expert on creating sustainable and regenerative destinations, communities, and events. Being the founder of and chief changemaker of the Global Destination Sustainability Movement, Mr. Bigwood is going to inspire us how to brand and construct a destination being more vivid, flourishing, and resilient to visit, meet, and live in. Lastly, yet importantly, I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation to Mr. Mark Williams of Gds for being once again the moderator of today, and to all of you joining the online seminar with us today. Wishing you all the most rewarding and enjoyable time during this seminar. Please enjoy.
Thank you, Benson. It's Mike Williams here from Gaining Edge, and it's good to have you all on board again for the second seminar for 2021. Welcome aboard, and thank you very much to Benson Lau, President of IPIM, to introduce the session. As Benson has mentioned, we've got one of the world's best experts in sustainability, particularly for the MICE industry, the business events industry. Guy Bigwood, who's the Managing Director and Chief Changemaker at Global Destinations Sustainability Movement. And Guy's got many years experience working with destinations around the world and also working with previously with MCI in creating sustainable practices for the meetings industry. He's the go-to person for speaking on this topic. And today he's going to talk about creating a sustainable business events destination and also looking at creating sustainable business practices for meeting planners and operators in the MICE sector. One of the key questions we'd like to ask you today and look at today is how Macau can make its move towards becoming a more sustainable destination. So without further ado, I want to introduce the guru of sustainability on the global platform, Mr. Guy Bigwood. Over to you, Guy.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for some of you. Welcome from Barcelona. I'm here to talk about regenerative events and regenerative destinations, and I thought we'd start off with a little tour of regenerative destinations. So with your permission, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So I don't really need to tell you what's going to happen in this world, do I, right now? I'm sure pretty much most of you have seen the crazy temperatures and crazy things happening around the world, and this big thing called the heat dome happening across Siberia and parts of China and Canada. But I think it's important to stop and realize what's happening, and start to think how this will affect our work and our industry and our livelihoods. So temperatures are set to increase between 2 to 5 degrees centigrade. 2 degrees centigrade if we're doing a good job, 5 degrees if we're not doing a good job. And that's by the end of the century. So obviously that is going to transform our cities. We're already seeing how forest fires across many parts of the world are out of control. And, the scientists are predicting we only have 78 years left of rainforests. Rainforests control our weather. They feed us. They feed our rivers. So we're kind of racing towards extinction right now. Every day we lose, or every 20 minutes we lose a species. There's 1 million species that are under risk of extinction. And whether that's China or South America or the UK or Australia, our biosystems, our ecosystems are under severe pressure. And just think about that. Why do people often travel? Why do people visit magic countries such as China? A lot of that is because of the nature, the amazing seas, the amazing mountains. And so we're damaging one of our key assets. And then look at the seas. Every year we're putting 8 million tons of plastic into the sea. And that's affecting our sea life, it's affecting our seafood. And what do we love to eat, especially in Macau, is amazing seafood. So we're putting all of that at risk. It's our assets. It's what we really use for our work. So if you start to think of that, these are major mega issues that are changing our lives, our work, our industry. So whether it's COVID, whether it's the recession and the economic challenges, whether it's climate change, biodiversity collapse, even social issues happening around the world, these are major issues. So in our work as tourism and events professionals, we're going to have to get much better at adapting and learning to work with these big challenges. So right now, I think in the last 18 months, some of us have been stopping and thinking about what this means to the future. How will all these things change our destination? And there's so much stuff happening, so many developments, rebuild, closing down, restart, stopping, that we really have to start to think long-term, not just short-term about what's happening. And so how does climate change affect tourism and events? In China, the last couple of weeks, you've had some terrible floods. We've seen the nightmare pictures on the trains and in the metro stations. Unfortunately, our industry creates carbon emissions, and those carbon emissions are rising. So we are going to be under a lot of pressure to review the kind of emissions that we create, just as the energy industry has been, just as the car industry has been. So we have to stop and play our part in this. So that means changing how the intensity of emissions created by our industry is founded, is based on. So that means looking at everything from buildings to flying to the activities we do to the food we source. All of these have a key role in how we manage and reduce our carbon emissions. The great news is that shift happens. Right now, each one of us is living through a great sustainability revolution. Look at your cities. Look at many of the cities in China where you're world leaders. Look at Macau and some of the work that's happening, and some of the amazing casinos and hotel buildings. We are building low impact green buildings. We're changing how our cities are designed. This is a mock-up of London and is talking about the change that will happen in London. This is happening all around the world. And it's happening in cities, it's happening in brands, it's happening in cars. It's an amazing moment. And it's really starting to happen in sustainable travel and events. I've been working in this focus for about 20 years now, and I've never seen so much activity given to sustainability ever. Recent survey of 30,000 people around the world by booking.com came out and said 61% of people want to travel more sustainably post-COVID. Okay, and this data is from China, it's from the US, from Australia. It's thousands of people per 30 countries. The same study picked out and said, right now, 72% of travelers think that us, the travel companies, the events companies, should be offering more sustainable choices. 48 people say it's harder to be sustainable while they're on vacation or traveling than their everyday life. And 49% say there just aren't enough sustainable options. It's too difficult. So we need to make that easier, don't we? We need to make sustainable events, sustainable travel much easier. If we flip to the sustainable events world, some research that we did with IMEX and with the Marriott hotels, and we did it various times last year, and the list data is from October, and 96% of the 2,000 event professionals that we spoke to said sustainability is more important in their future. And that, when I first did this, it was 5%, I think in 2006 or something, the first time I did the survey. So I believe that the market has tipped. And now the work that I'm doing with some of the very big event organizers, the big corporates and the destinations around the world is backing this up. We did another survey for European DMOs and all the destinations in Europe, and 95% of their CEOs said they will be stepping up their sustainability programs as a result of COVID. So everything is kind of changing. So as I said before, I think it's time to stop, to rethink and redesign. And for me, this means going to the next level. We've kind of had a past that was degenerative, you could say. We extracted, we used resources. We didn't really think about where things coming, where people flew from, what they consumed, what we threw away. To be honest, it was degenerative. Then the last kind of 10 years, some of us have been on a journey toward sustainability. I think Macau has definitely been on that journey in some of the places. And that's okay, that's good. And that's kind of focused on doing less bad. Let's have less waste, less emissions. But right now, with the challenges that we have in front of us with climate change, biodiversity collapse, that's not going to get us out of the problem. We can't use the same thinking to get us out of the problem as got us into the problem. Repeat that. We can't use the same thinking as to get out of the problem as what got us in the problem. So we need a new type of thinking, and that's a regenerative thinking. We need to start to think about how we recover, how we regenerate the economy. Right now, our economies are on its knees in many parts of the world. How we recover our social infrastructure in our communities. How we recover the environment and nature around us. So it becomes stronger and resilient to be able to deal with another COVID type of virus or an economic crisis or whatever. We have to build resilience back into that system. So now is the time to rethink and redesign. How do we use tourism and events, the work we do, to enable flourishing, inclusive, and equitable communities? Communities where everyone benefits from success. How do we spark a thriving local economy? How do we make Macau and the Chinese economy even more strong? How do we make these visitor experiences just extraordinary? How do we make the resident experiences fantastic so the residents support tourism? And how do we nurture and restore the natural ecosystems? So that's the real key challenge of what we have to do over the next few years and into the future on a day-to-day basis. So that's what we do, the organization I created about 5 years ago. And we created an organization that, envisions this future as a responsible and regenerative tourism that is creating thriving destinations for all. And the work we do is about empowering destinations and the destination partners with the new mindsets that we need, the new strategies we need, and the new skill sets we need to regenerate these places. The places you live in, the places you work in, the places you want to meet in and do business in. So that's our organization today. And we're working, I think, with 76, 77 destinations around the world on this kind of work, on strategy work and education work. One of the key things that we do is we created a benchmarking program called the GDS Index, the Global Destination Sustainability Index. And this is a benchmarking program that looks at 4 areas of a destination. So in your case, if we were looking at Macau, we would say, what is the city's environmental performance, i.e. run by the city councils and municipalities? What is the social performance? How is corruption or accessibility or health and safety or wellness? What about supplier performance? How many of the hotels are eco-certified? What about the airport? What about all the agencies, restaurants, the visitor experiences? And then lastly, we look at destination management processes, i.e. what the DMO is doing. So we look at strategies and education programs and all of that. And then this allows us to benchmark a city. So here you can see 3 cities. So we can see how well those 3 cities are comparing them against themselves: Copenhagen, Geneva, and Reykjavik, Iceland, against those 4 categories. And so this allows us to really help cities understand where they're at, where they can do better, and where the opportunities are to catalyze innovation. So it's a program that's been going for 5 years as the GDS Index, and really catalyze performance. So from that, I did a little research, and I thought I'd pick out from that 7 actions that I think are really strong in terms of what destinations could be doing and should be doing and are doing. So I picked up on kind of a little example from many destinations to bring up as the 7 actions I'd recommend to destinations such as Macau. Okay, so my first one is about being courageous, being bold, and being brave. It's about challenging the status quo. Many destination or DMOs with marketing organizations, for the last few years, we've been talking about DMOs going from marketing to management. I think right now, COVID requires bold and brave leadership. And so that management focus on leadership focus from a destination is really, really key. But it's a tricky thing. And I like to look at Vienna as an example of someone trying to work out how to do this and leading from the front. So Vienna always talks about that their role is a bit like rowing. They have a big river, so they're on the river and they're rowing. And sometimes when you're rowing, you're actually rowing. You're doing all the work. You're sweating away. Sometimes you're at the kind of at the front and you're steering. You're saying to the left, to the right, and you take your industry on a journey towards sustainability. Sometimes you're coaching a city or your industry or your people, and you're saying, "God, you did a great job. Come on, a little bit more here. How about this? How can you improve that?" And then sometimes you're just on the side of the river cheering and going, "Great job, people." And that's the kind of more traditional marketing, right? Cheering away. So right now we need to be doing that kind of stuff and thinking about how do we take the whole of an industry on a journey. And that means asking some pretty tough questions that people might not always want to hear. Is what happens if the borders don't open for another 5 years? What happens if visitors don't fly back? What happens? So horrible questions that many of us don't want to ask, but we have to come out and flush those around and then look at possible scenarios to fix them. So once you kind of flushed out the questions and you're having the proper conversations, it's important to create a new vision for success. So how do we get people together to create that vision, right? And what does it look like? And what are the elements of that vision? In the past, we would have just said, we want to increase visitor numbers by 10% or 20% or 30%. And that's the kind of goals that Macau had, or, many places had. And that was great then, but not now, not in a regenerative world. Right now, we have to think about the visitor, the community, the residents, the environment, and the economy and all the entrepreneurs. So we need goals for each of those, a different set of KPIs. So I think that's really key. So New Zealand, that's what they've done, right? And they're really thinking about, they've got KPIs for the New Zealanders, for the visitor experiences, for the planet. But then you've got to turn that into a story, a vision that empowers others. And that's going to be very local and very authentic and real. What I love about New Zealand's work is they've linked it into their Maori culture and are really using their ancestral knowledge to come out and help them tell stories. So you can see here, these are kind of 3 of the values of New Zealand tourism, shall we call it? And they're all linked into a very important element of Maori, or their indigenous culture. And so that makes it totally unique. No one can copy that. So it's a beautiful strategy, it's very unique, and that's the key driver through all their work. So that's an example of vision using different KPIs with a very unique and authentic way of telling the story. Glasgow in Scotland has been on a journey. They've gone from steam, been a very industrial place, to green, to being one of the leading green cities of the north in Europe. And their strategy that we've been working on here is around Dear Green Place, which is actually what Glasgow means in Old Scots, in Gaelic. And so, the environment is a core pillar. Social enterprise and unlocking small businesses and social businesses is another enterprise. The food revolution and having better, more sustainable food is another pillar. And accessibility and allowing everyone to get around is key. So that's their vision, and their vision has been really successful. Until April the 1st, in just the first year of this strategy, they used the strategy to win £84 million worth of new business. So a significant bit of chunk of business to them, especially in these tough times. And they've carried on. And so really, really important. So let's look at action 3, which is about collaborating and engaging. To create those strategies, we have to work together. So we need the expertise in stakeholder engagement. So DMOs need to bring everyone to the table. So I'm going to use Sydney here as an example. Sydney, the city and the Convention Bureau and the tourism organisations worked really great to create something called the Sustainable Destination Partnership. So an initiative that brought everyone together. And once they were together, they started to look at the challenges and they started to prioritise. So this year we're going to work on, so the first few years they've been working on plastics, they've been working on food waste, they've been working on procurement and working on measurements. So really great energies, great marketing moments, creates the energy and helps to train and teach people. Barcelona had a similar approach, but the council or the municipality of Barcelona created a citizens council. So they've done a similar type of thing, but they brought in people that represent each of the city areas. So the residents. They brought in district bodies, experts, NGOs. And so they have a formal mechanism that has to review each of the tourism strategies of Barcelona. Let's jump back to Sydney again. So we talked about that sustainable destination partnership. One of the first things they did was they went out and measured what is the footprint of hospitality. And they looked at the environment footprint. To their shock, they found that the hospitality produced 11% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. It used 14% of the water, and it was using 46% of the commercial waste, producing 66. Obviously, right now, hospitality is not down, but that was where it was, and hopefully we'll go back to. So how do we change that? So they started then to work as part of that sustainable destination management partnership to take that data points and turn them into goals and then KPIs that they could track, and they track them each year. So on the right is a copy of the report that they produce each year. So data is critical. If you're not measuring, you're not managing, and you're not going to achieve any of your goals. So all of us have to work out how we measure these new KPIs of sustainability. And some of you would say, yeah, I've been doing that for a long time. Brilliant. That's exactly what you need to do. But you also need to review if you're still measuring the right things, because many of us have spent a lot of time and energy measuring the wrong things. Okay, action 5 is about education. So how do you take everyone in the destination or within your business on a journey? So Switzerland have started something, and they created a program called Sustainable. So we've been working on this for a while, and it's really how, first of all, how do we convey sustainability in a refreshing way, a way that is positive. It's never a restriction. It's never negative. It's always an enrichment. It's always better. Switzerland, if you think of Switzerland, it's all about quality. Okay, so how do we make sustainability part of that quality experience? So we created an education campaign, working with all of the destinations, all of the agencies. We created a new certification campaign. So there's a certification system now with 3 different levels. So people can start at a basic level with a commitment, and they can move up to world-class certification of their hotel or their agency or whatever, the venue. And then obviously a powerful communications initiative around that. Switzerland has pretty good budgets, and so Robert De Niro and Federer, the tennis player, are on the videos, but I don't have time to show you that. But that's the next one. So really, how do you engage in your business and your destination, and how do you educate and inspire? Catalyze innovation. Sustainability needs, and regeneration needs new ways of thinking. So what we did here in Ljubljana, twice a year, we bring all of the small producers of food. So people make wine, honey, vegetables, and they bring them together with the hoteliers, with the venues, and they do a matchmaking. And they start to see how they can increase the buying of local food and produce. And that by planning and confirming orders, farmers can plant larger amounts of vegetables, for example, and they know that someone's going to buy it. So we do this twice a year. It's been going for quite a few years now. I've been really successful, and allowed them to not only buy local, but start to plant more unusual fruits and vegetables, stuff that's more unique. And so this has been so successful, we now rolled it out to the hospitals and to the schools. So that's one way of catalyzing innovation. My last one here is about creating a new story. So we talked at the beginning about having a new story for your destination. We've got to get everyone involved in telling that story. So if we go back to New Zealand here, New Zealand created a campaign which is called Good Morning World. New Zealand is the first place in the world to see the sun every morning. And so they got their New Zealanders, the local people, doing a little video to explain their beautiful place and say, Good Morning World. Totally unique little kind of micro videos. And again, everyone was involved in telling the story. So that's that story. Those are 7 areas I think are really, really important for a destination. I actually think you can take those into any organization too. So I think COVID right now gives us a a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to stop, to rethink, ask ourselves, are we travel agents or are we change agents? A lot of the work we do, especially in the meetings and events industry, is about creating changes, catalyzing changes, leaving a legacy. So I think we can use these Sustainable Development Goals as a baseline to really think about how do we do and use our work to make a better place to live. So Macau, my invitation to you guys is, you can leapfrog, you can have a look at what another world has done and learned from 10, 15 years of sustainability and go to the next level and create a really amazing zero carbon, zero waste, zero inequality industry where everyone benefits from success. So if you'd like to make more than that, know more about this kind of destination approaches, the Gds Academy has courses about storytelling and communications and destination management may be useful for you. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much, everyone. Please feel free to ask me some questions.
Thanks, Guy. Great insights into what destinations are doing around the world in sustainability, and the movement seems to be gathering momentum in all parts of the world. And I was going to ask Guy later on, but a bit about what's going on in Asia. But before we do that, before we start Q&A, Guy's going to answer questions that you may have, but we're going to throw up a couple of poll questions just to get a bit of insight into your thinking on sustainability. So I'm going to ask Nigel if you could pop up the poll questions. The first question is, how do you rank the importance of sustainability to the success of Macau's business events industry? And if you're not from Macau, you can apply that to your own destination or region. And the second question is, how important do you think it is for Macau or Hong Kong or China, how important it is to have a citywide sustainability plan? And if you could answer those in the next 10 or 15 seconds, we'll show you the results.
I mean, just to see what the results are, Mike.
Yes, Nigel, when you're ready, throw up the results. Okay, there we are. So that's great. 92% think it's extremely important or important, and there's a few that have don't think it's so important. And how important it is to have citywide sustainability? Again, it's 100%. That's fantastic. There's a lot of work to do there by the sound of it, Guy. So we'll now sorry, mate.
Yeah, interesting results, eh? And and it's interesting to see the split now of kind of 50-50 between important and extremely important, and that change is what we're seeing very much in European destinations in the last 2 years, and now it's how it's gone from important to extremely important. And we're starting to really see that shift in the States. It's gone from not important now, and it's going to important. It will go to extremely important. And we're starting to see the same shift in Asia as well. So, yeah, the market's tipping. For me, it's a great moment after 20 years of working on this to see the focus change, because it's obviously critical for our future.
Yeah, it's amazing. Can I just see if there's any questions? You can either put a question up on the chat box, or you can raise your hand, or you can just ask a question if you like. I've got a couple of comments here. Bruno from Macau, it's a very hot topic now in China, which is fantastic. Have we got any specific questions anybody would like to ask to Guy?
Feel free to throw out something, or an observation, or something you're seeing, or something you're doing in your own business. Fascinated to see. It's I've worked a lot in Macau, but not for the last few years, so interesting to see how things have changed.
I've just got a comment here from Ting saying, please guys, pause between talking. Translation. There's a question here from Bruno. This is more for IPM. What are the plans of IPM in this area? Teresa or someone from IPM, do you want to respond to that question? Teresa? Do you know of anything that's taking place in Macau to start looking at the topic of sustainability? You've got your mic turned off. Could you turn your mic on?
Hi. Hi everyone. Actually, for EP, we are.
Oh, we've got a bad line there, Teresa. Teresa, we're losing you there. I'm sorry.
Sustainability in Macau. So maybe please feel free to join us, and we will release some.
Teresa, we've lost you. We've got the really bad line. Maybe what we can do is talk to Teresa at the end of this session and maybe get her to we send you something in response in writing. So we will respond to that question and get back to you shortly. Any other questions before I start asking my own questions of Guy? I'd like to interrogate him a bit further.
I think it's interesting to see how things are moving up in the region. So we've got some really great activity happening in Korea. There are really some great leadership stuff in Korea.
I was going to ask you, Guy, who are the leaders in Asia in sustainability? I keep seeing Thailand and Singapore coming up in this area, but who are the leaders in Asia?
I think Thailand I had so much respect for, because TSEB has done a fantastic job. They're nowhere near the most sustainable destination in the world because they've got some major infrastructure challenges socially and environmentally, but they've been a real champion for what they can do within the events industry, and they've made some amazing progress. And for me, if you have so many problems and yet you can still make so much progress, that's an amazing piece of work.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples of what Thailand is actually doing in that space?
Yeah, so it's kind of building up of kind of what I said in the presentation. They're running education programs. They are running certification programs to help their venues and hotels achieve certification. They're doing co-funding. They're doing communication and marketing. They've created their own certification. So they've done a lot of capacity building, which has really made a big difference.
Yeah. And I've seen on your list of clients was Kyoto. I've done a little bit of work in Kyoto. What's Kyoto? Kyoto is an interesting study too, I think, in sustainability. It focuses more on retaining its culture and its historical traditions and culture. Is that right? What's your
I mean that's a key element of sustainability. So Japan, they've done a lot of work with that. So Kyoto's done really good, but it's also come up with some interesting ways. They've kind of set themselves up as almost as an agency to do renting of certain things. So rather than you buying badges for conventions and bags for conventions, you can actually rent them from the DMO, from the Convention Bureau, and they're beautifully handmade Japanese bits of culture, really. So that's really nice. Sapporo in Japan has done an amazing job really working with the SDGs. I think it's a global example of how you create an impact strategy based on the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's a really good example. And then again, Singapore, you mentioned earlier, leads the world in terms of infrastructure. And they've done some good jobs in the past around standards and certifications, but they let it drop. But they're really just starting to kickstart everything again. So there's an example of someone who's dropped down and now restarting again with this kind of boom and pressure.
Guy, I've got a question here from Bruno. Bruno's a major DMC based in Macau. Bruno, I know I'd actually like to ask the question yourself if you like. I'd just like to hear somebody else's voice other than myself and Guy. So Bruno, can you unmute yourself and ask the question?
Mike, that doesn't work in this format with webinar.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, Bruno's asked the question, can you provide some sources of information on best practices? Where can you go to sort of research and look into this?
So I think there's different places. So if you come to our website, gds.earth, you'll see in the blog there's some good stories and best practices. The Events Industry Council is doing some great work on standards. And you can get great free standards from them, which you can download, as I said, for free. Positive Impact, based out of the UK, has done some really good work on sustainable event practices and some good stories.
Right. Thanks, Guy. If you've got any other suggestions, pass them on, Guy. But what we'll do at the end of the session, if you've got any further questions you'd like to ask, because we have to kick on to the next topic, please do. So send your questions through, and we'll make sure we respond to those questions after the session, or if we've got time after the next presentation. So we're going to get Guy now to talk a bit more about taking it down to the next level. We talked about the destination level. Now we're going to talk about actual practices at a operation level, at the venue event management level. So, Guy, I'll pass it back to you to talk about sustainable practices at event management, for event management. So, thanks, mate.
Good. Let's get that presentation ready.
We'll get back to Q&A later on. Okay.
Hello again. Hi. So we looked a little bit about regenerative destinations. Let's take the same type of thinking, but let's apply it more to the events and the work we do for events. So let me share my screen again. Let's stay with this theme of regenerative revolution. Okay. Good. Okay. Good. Let's get it. So I shared a stat earlier. 96% of event professionals said sustainability is important. And that was 2,000 event professionals that we interviewed through Australia, Europe, and North America. A few in China, but not many. Okay. Interestingly, just before COVID, 97% of those people said they'd done something around sustainability. So it's not saying that they're the most sustainable events, but they've done something. So things were changing. The market had started to tip, which I think is really important. If you then really ask those same people another question, how many of you have advanced sustainability programs? It was only 2.5%. So there's a big gap. So when we come back to this chart, we were trying to get people to move from degenerative to sustainable practices. And we're only kind of a first step there. So now we want to go to the next step, regenerative practices. So this is going to take work, and it's going to take efforts and initiatives, but we've got to do it. We're running against time, and this is critical, and it offers massive opportunities for each and every one of us in the experiences that we create. So I'd like to look at that and look at the benefits as well to us as event organizers, as professionals. So I'm going to pick on 8 best practices of the leaders. And I'm going to link this to the work I did with Marriott and IMEX, which is this report called the Regenerative Revolution. And I created a framework called Hanawa, which is an ancient African word about wellness in how we live. So let's look at number 1. And some of these are a bit connected to the destinations best practices that I shared earlier. So number 1, we have to kind of stop, as we've had to stop, and rethink of our event strategy. So how do we use our event not only to deliver those business objectives, to launch a new car or bring a group of dentists together, but how do we really take that the next step to really use the events to regenerate the economy, the communities, and nature? So how do we start to do that? So I want to use lots of examples here. So Green Build is one of the biggest global events about the green building industry. Okay, and so they've been real pioneers in sustainability. And so they are now, with their events, really starting to think about how do we organize zero waste events, zero emission events. Okay, how do we improve our sourcing? How do we improve our performance? So they've done that journey from kind of degenerative to sustainable practices. They're on that journey, but now they're starting to think about how we go to the next change and regenerate. How do we drive change across our industry? How do we drive change across the whole sustainable events industry? So even more, they're thinking outside of their own box. Oracle Open World, which sometimes comes to Macau, They've been real leaders for the last 10 years in terms of sustainability, and they are really going to the next level now, really looking at regeneration. So they are thinking of how do they use their events to really tackle poverty this is in San Francisco. How do they really use their event to give back and regenerate the communities? How do they make everyone's health and well-being better through participating in the event? How do they, zero waste and have nothing going to landfill? How do they get rid of single-use plastics? And how do they become zero carbon emissions and be cooler? So there's a big commercial organization. So Oracle, we could look at SAP, have very similar strategy. This is the Oracle's information. And number 2 is about reviewing your resource flows, is understanding how much resources you're using. So in these charts, we can see every year for the last 10 years, how Oracle has been looking at the waste, or how Oracle's been looking at the carbon emissions. And you can see how since 2012, their waste has gone down, so from 400 to less than 100 tons of waste. So phenomenal journey that is saving them money. Carbon emissions, you can see from the peak down from 1,000 down to 418, their carbon emissions have gone down massively, and why the events got bigger. So reviewing and understanding your resource flow is very key, because based on that, you can make new strategies, you can set new goals. So data is key. What those guys have done, or what in this case maybe IMEX has done here, is then rethink of the supply chains. How do you work really in partnership with all your suppliers? Because the suppliers have their own goals. So whether you're a Marriott or Intercontinental or the Sands Group, everyone has their own objectives to sustainability now. So how do you create a team? How do you work together? And so I think it's important here that you create your policy that allows you to communicate your event organization's policy. You communicate that to your suppliers. You bring that into the negotiation and the contracting phase. It's got to be on paper. So you contract. So you demand that your suppliers perform up to a certain level. But at the same time, you invite them in. So you're enrolling them and having conversations, and you can see how you can help them and they can help you. Then you implement the data collection systems across all the supply chain partners. So those 5 steps are key. And someone like IMEX has done that beautifully in Frankfurt and Vegas. And now, just if we look at waste alone in Las Vegas, they've eliminated 95% of their waste going to landfill. So very, very important, because we can't have this anymore. I took this photo a few years ago, and just look at that waste. It's just mental, isn't it? What a waste of money. What a disgrace that all of that crap goes into a landfill, or maybe even goes to the sea. We can't have that anymore. So that means redesigning our brand experiences. That waste I just showed you, at least 80% of that can be eliminated in the design phase, how you design your brand experiences. So it's looking at your stage sets and your stands. And I just used a very simple one here, but this stand here is made from recycled plastic that is found in the River of Thames in London, and they collect the plastic and then turn that into stage sets. You can do that on much bigger experiences now, and you can turn this into a calling card. So when you visit the stand, they're very proud of how it's made from plastic collected from the river in Canary Wharf. So that means that from the start, a year out before your event, we need to be designing out the waste and the pollution from the design, redesigning things for reuse. We need to keep products in use once we've made them. We then need to work out how we treat them when they come to the end of their life. We need to make sure that inclusiveness and diversity is built into our brand experiences. How do we treat everyone fairly? And then lastly, At what stage do we then start to think about how we regenerate people and nature through the brand experience? So those are 4 principles that I think are very key for our work. So yeah, I'll leave those with you there. So let's look at one of those steps, which is about focusing on regenerative resources. So here is a big trade show in Cape Town. It's the most important trade show about wine. It's absolutely, it's an important thing. 160 expo stands talking about wine, and all of those expo stands now are made. The one below here from a recycled cardboard board called Chanita. It's made from post-consumer waste, and you can turn that into fantastic shapes. You can build it really quick. So 160 stands built in 12 hours, very little waste, dirt, very clean and quick to tidy up, very light to ship. So we're saving time in the build-up. We're saving the number of trucks to ship it, which is saving carbon emissions and cost. You're saving weight. You're saving waste that goes to landfill, and you can reuse it very easily. And in this case, the bottom right-hand corner, when they used it for more than 5 times, they start to give away those stands to schools and turn them into tables. And so now schools in parts of Africa are now using that for their education. So there's a very practical way of rethinking a brand experience using regenerative resources. So regenerating people and nature through food is a really important thing, I believe, especially in Asia, Macau, my family's from Hong Kong. We know how important food is, right? So FLOSS stands for food that is fairly grown, it's local, it's organic, it's seasonal, and it's sustainable. So how do we restart and rethink of our food experiences so that they're FLOSS, fair, local, organic, seasonal, and sustainable? So let's look at this is a music festival that happens in Barcelona, and I love it. It's called DGTL, and so they've created a circular food experience. So they find urban farmers to grow them their vegetables. They then bring in their catering teams to work with the local farmers to grow, to cook what they can get grown locally. They then work to communicate that to the festival visitors, to really think about how to have a more sustainable, regenerative food experience at the show. So they get the recycling, they've eliminated meat out of their menus. They've gone fantastic vegetarian and vegan food, really amazing food. They're getting them to compost and to recycle on site. And they're then turning that compost into soil that they give back to the urban farmers to grow food again for next year's festival. So a beautiful circle. So really some great work on that. We could look also to Sydney. The convention centre in Sydney has done a fantastic work, really identifying all of these local businesses and all these adopts near Sydney who are their farmers, where they can get honey or wine or cheese or vegetables. And so they've totally changed how they buy their food in Sydney, now the ICC. And they're monitoring it. So they know they spent in 2019 4.3 million Aussie dollars on local produce and wine, and that brought a benefit of 8.3 million to that local economy. So how could many of you start to buy more from China and locally versus buying from Brazil or other parts of the world? So number 7 is about re-energizing, re-empowering people. And Salesforce has an event called Dreamforce. Perhaps, I'm not sure if that's come to Macau yet, but this is a big event. It's a massive, 171,000 people attended this in 2019. So it's a big event. They're really focused on the Sustainable Development Goals. They're really focused on getting people out into the community to do action, and it's massive. They planted 5,000 trees together. They're working through. They supported 400 youth organizations. So things like that. So they're really getting back. Creating. This is a picture of them creating kind of food parcels for parts of the poor people in the local communities, and so they've done some amazing work. So those are the 7 areas, and often when I get to this point, people say, that's so nice, isn't it? But isn't it just too expensive? Isn't it more expensive to be sustainable? I just can't do this. Every time I look at it, it's too expensive. So every time I go to buy recycled paper, it's 10% more. Every time I go to buy organic food, it's 20% more. So my answer to that is yes and no. My success is I've never done a sustainable event that's cost me more money. My events have always delivered a 0 increase, or they've saved me money. In fact, I think here my data shows that 66% of the time we're increasing our ROI. So how do you do that? How do you do that? And so the trick is you've got to look at not at one thing, but holistically at everything. So if you pay 20%, maybe more, for organic food, but if you eliminate the beef, then you're going for a more organic vegetable menu that actually is less expensive. If you're paying to have recycled paper and that 10% more, but you're actually printing 50% less, then you will save money. If you have a recycled organic bag, but then they're only available for people to buy them, then you're saving money. So how do you go through everything but think holistically? So some of this work that we've done and reporting impact, and here is a congress for 1,500 people in Cartagena, Colombia. This is nowhere near as sustainable as Macau. And even here, in one of the toughest places in the world to do a sustainable event, I saved $11,000 for the clients. So let's look at another example. Here's SAP, and one of these events was in Macau. So we did 5 conferences for 20,000 people around the world. I saved them 86,000 euros, over $100,000. Okay, how do we do that? Yes, we paid more for some things, but we saved a lot of things by getting rid of stuff that we didn't need, by moving to brand experiences that we could recycle and reuse, by thinking of how do we get rid of buses and get people walking, all those little steps, because a sustainable event is a series of little steps. So you can do that. Each of us can do this, and it's really about this journey of progress and not perfection. You can't make 100% sustainable event, I don't believe. What you can do is an event that makes difference. So first of all, it's got to be worth it that you get people together and you're going to do something with that event. And 2, then how do you minimize those impacts? And then how do you start to think about how you create positive impacts, or I call the footprints? So all the positive stuff, the tree building, the community work, the economic regeneration. How do we take that forward? So those are those 7 steps I just started to touch with. And I think, as I said, you've got to start. It's about just getting going, and you won't be perfect when you start. Look at the visible and the easy actions first. Don't do the really tough ones first. I think start with the easy stuff. Allow yourself to get some success. Measure data. If you don't have the data, it's not going to work. Sit back and learn. What have you learned from yourself? Talk to other people. What are you learning from them? Improve your processes, and then scale. So the big organizers such as Oracle or SAP now are making this mandatory. They're scaling it. They used to have 1 or 2 events that were sustainable. Now they're taking this to all of the events, and it won't be optional in the future. So if you're a supplier and you're not ready for this, you're going to lose the business. As simple as that. The post-COVID world is different. and you won't be able to charge more for it because budgets are tight. So you've got to do this and integrate it in a way that adds value for your business, for your client's business. To that, it's all about people, how you train them, the processes used, and the technology used to manage this. So that's the end. I will stop there. There's a great quote that I've learnt, and it's the impossible doesn't exist. And I think COVID has taught us that, you know, if we can create a vaccine in 6 months, if we can lock down borders and stop people flying, all these things that were impossible now are possible. So we can change. Profound change is possible, and it's really exciting. So I think as we build back, we can build back better, and we can really change the way we work and have even more impact onto the visitors, our clients, the communities, and nature. So if you'd like to know more about this, have a look at the Gds Academy. We have a whole series of programs about regeneration, and one there, a regenerative event management masterclass, where we'll be teaching this program in a lot more detail. This is like what I talked about. This framework is a little taster. So thank you very much. If you'd like to know more, the Regenerative Revolution white paper has a lot more information about this. Okay, guys, thanks very much.
Thanks, Guy. Excellent. Thanks very much for that session. Again, before we get into Q&A, we're going to put up a couple of poll questions for you to answer. So, Nigel, if you could pop up those poll questions. Okay, the first question is, what is the status of your sustainability plan of your own organisation? And there's three options there. We have an advanced sustainability strategy and plan. We have started our sustainability journey and have a basic plan, or we do not have a sustainability action plan. And the second question is, what challenges have you encountered with the implementation of your sustainability plan? Is it cost, time and resources, sustainability knowledge and capacity of employees and in-house teams, or sustainability knowledge and capacity of suppliers? So if you could fill that out, and in 10 or 15 seconds, we'll get the results up. So when you're ready, Nigel. Okay, some interesting responses there. 60% are saying we do not have a sustainable action plan. So it's interesting when you saw the first poll came up saying that everybody thinks this is very important, but it's the challenge is actually getting a sustainability plan up. And under challenges, the key thing is time and resources and sustainability knowledge and capacity of supply. So, Guy, have you got a response to that? How to look? Where do these guys start to get the? What's their first step to get things off the ground? And keep it simple.
I think the most important thing is starting. And you saw 60% there don't have a plan. So that is often a real big challenge. So it's so easy to say, but it's start. You know, start with something, 3 goals, 3 actions. Run an education program for your staff. Set some goals. Start measuring some really, really basic stuff like that. So that's where I would start with.
I'll just ask a question about measuring. What kind of tools are available to measure sustainability? Are there any tools available that can help you do this? Because it's not an easy thing to sit down and just work out yourself. Probably you need something.
So there's lots of things. That kind of depends if you're a venue, hotel, destination, or an event organizer. So if you're a hotel, I would say most people in Macau, if you're a hotel or venue, are already measuring the data. Well, you definitely are, because you're paying electricity bills, so you know how much you're paying. So things like that. And so the basic stuff, energy, waste, the venues are already collecting. So how do you get that information from the facilities team to a sales team to an event operations team, so that you're supporting your clients? Okay, and because now on the other side, the event organizers need to be able to do that. So if you're someone such as the Venetian and the Macau, I created a program to allow them to be able to provide reports to the clients. So for certain high-profile clients, they can provide that information, which is a competitive edge to help event organizers who are really focused on measurement. If you are an event organizer, there's some good tools out there, such as there's a really good tool called Meet Green with a calculator that helps you assess and measure your impacts. There's a couple of really good things coming out also now from the UN and from the UK, which we'll share some information about that later. But yeah, let's just start small. Just start to measure your waste and your carbon emissions. Keep it as that for now, and then move on and upwards.
Before I ask my next, is there any questions coming from the from any participants there? Anybody got any specific questions I ask? Please put up on the chat or Q&A. I'd like to go back to your first presentation, Guy, and talk about maybe some practical examples of the difference between sustainability and regenerative practices. Can you give me some practical examples in event planning or destination management on what the difference between the two things are?
Sure. So, sustainability focus is about doing less bad. It's like, can we emit less emissions? Can we recycle a bit more waste? Okay, so that's a good approach when you're starting, but really that kind of approach is not going to be good enough for us anymore. So we have to go to an approach which is about doing better. How do we leave the planet better after an event, or the communities better after an event than it were beforehand? So we start to think about, right, okay, let's offset 100% of the emissions we created. Well, that would be fantastic. But could we even offset more emissions than we created? Because we need to absorb carbon in this planet. So could we, rather than offset 100%, we offset 150%. So that's regenerative. We're actually regenerating the planet after the event. Is there a way that not only will we recycle the waste, so there's zero waste to landfill, but we give back some of those, the materials that we've used to a community project. So we're actually helping that community, and it will be better, Macau, after them than before the event. So that's a regenerative culture. How do we keep improving things after? And it's really important, especially with events, because events create so much benefit if they're organized rightly, in economic impact, social impact, and environmental impact, if we do those right.
All right, thanks, Guy. Look, it doesn't look like we've got any more questions. I think people have got a lot to take in, and this presentation will be available online for all participants if you want to review it later. And again, if you've got any other further questions you want to send through to us after the session, please do. There's been two interesting points made today from the polls. One is there's a great appetite for a sustainability plan for Macau, and I guess out of the second set of polls, there's obviously there's interest there, but the development of sustainable practices in Macau needs a bit of work. So there's a really good platform for some further discussions, and maybe an opportunity there for IPM to start this dialogue with the industry. So it could be a good starting point for Macau's sustainability drive. And thank you, Guy, for a great insight. I'm sure you could probably talk for a couple more hours on some of the things and projects you've done around the world, but we don't have that time. But I'm sure you're happy to receive Q&As from anybody in the group after this session. I'd like to thank Guy for his time. He's talking from Barcelona, so it's early morning there, and it's time for coffee. And for our friends in Macau, it's getting to close of business, and I thank you all for participating today. Before we go, we just want to remind you on the 23rd of August, coming up, we've got another session coming up called Meeting the Needs of the Associations. And this goes into talking about what's happening to the associations market, how are they planning events, what considerations are they taking into play when they're choosing destinations, venues and suppliers post-COVID, and how can the industry respond to that? So we've got a great lineup of panelists from the Asia-Pacific region, expert in the association sector from China to Australia to Philippines, and we hope you put that in your diaries and look forward to seeing you then. Thanks to IPM. Thanks again, Guy, and thank you for attending today's session. Thank you very much.